Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, y'all. I think I heard some elk bugling out in the lobby. It was like a cold, early fall morning in the Rocky Mountains. But now it's a little bit more balmy in here, so I'm glad. But my feet are still cold. So anyway, thank you, Dan, again for that introduction. And for the folks that were at last year's convention, and I was not, you saw my colleague Frank Carroll and his presentation. And it was pretty eye-opening. That's the way Frank kind of rolls, with some eye-opening stuff. But I think where we're going to go with the Association of Consulting Foresters is we're going to talk about practical solutions to very vexing land management problems. Okay? So before I fully get started, I would like to introduce the Executive Director of the Association of Consulting Foresters, Shannon McCabe, and Lone Star Forestry President, Wayne Pfluger, and the President of ACF and his lovely wife, Shelley. So, and obviously Lone Star Forestry, Texas. Okay, so we have one of our members right here. And let me see if I can get this to move. There we go. So as I go through these slides, the one thing I want you to remember is how to connect with us at the end. Okay? There'll be a lot of things that you'll see and so forth, and I'll give some examples, but the bottom line is 06. How do you connect with us? And we have a table out front, and hope to visit with you and tell you about our members and our services. Okay, so we're here today because of what Dan said in his introduction. He came over to Eugene and we formed a lobby. It was in the hotel lobby. We had a long meeting, and we felt that there was a good natural connection. So between the board of the Dude Ranch Association and the ACF, an MOU was formed, okay, where ACF member firms, and there's about 735 members or so, not firms, but in members of ACF that can provide services to the ranches. And so in this MOU, we just wanted to make sure that we have cooperation and collaboration on helping you to sustain your landscapes. Now remember, you all know that your landscapes are very special to you. That's your setting. That's what, and you provide that accoutrement, that service, that memory setting in those landscapes. But those landscapes aren't static, and they will change, and they can change to the better or to the detriment of your business. So it's very important that, well, we have our insurance underwriters, and we have our vendors that provide services to you. The land management services that ACF members can provide for your ranches are something that you can come to rely on. Okay, so a short history about the Association of Consulting Foresters. But I will say that the founder of North American Forestry is a gentleman named Gifford Pinchot. And Gifford Pinchot became the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service and everything. He's legendary in the forestry world. But at one time, when Pinchot was starting out in 1895, he was a consulting forester in New York City. I don't believe there's ever been a consulting forester in New York City since then. Maybe there is, and that I just don't know about, but Pinchot was there in New York in those days. And then today, we have our membership, but we are the gold standard of professional consulting forestry. And we're more than just trees. We are land management services and helping people plan, just like you use your financial planner to plan your long-term financial estate, we help you plan your long-term land management estate. So we have 24 active state and regional chapters, and I know there's a number of people from Colorado that are here. Raise your hands. Great. Well, we have an association in Colorado where I am the chapter chair. It's called the Four Corners Association of Consulting Foresters, and you'll see a slide as to where we are across that. But there are in-state for Colorado and surrounding states members that can provide services. So our core values are professionalism. What we do, we use the latest science, forestry science, natural resource science, biological sciences. We professionally write plans and work with our constituents, our clients, to fulfill what they want on their lands, on their grounds, in their time, and even for the future. So what happens today sets the forest in trajectory for sometime next century. So, and of course, with any organization like you all have, like the Dude Ranch Association and the Foundation, there are ethics, there are principles. Ooh, that slide kind of rolled onto each other. I'll move on. But suffice it to say that in order to stay a member of ACF, you have to be current on continuing education and in forestry and sciences and in business and in ethics. So we meet those standards every 2 years. All right, here we are by the numbers. And this generally is the area, and including up here, British Columbia, with the members of the Dude Ranch Association. And so in the West, we have 109 members. I mentioned the Four Corners chapter, which is Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. And there's a number of ranches within there, but I also know as we go forward, this is where y'all are, and Wyoming has a lot of ranches up in that northwest corner, south of Montana, next to the Idaho border. But this is where our membership resides, and again, that's the Four Corners, and even down in Arizona we have several members, and then California has a number of members there, and I know there's folks from California here too. So we're close to your ranches, and we can provide services in land management. So I think this came from the foundation. It's the Grand Tetons. I think I saw a picture similar to that earlier today, so it's probably the same ranch. And so like I was saying through my presentation, we just don't do the trees, okay? It's a full service practice that each one of our consultancies has. So we work to sustain your soils, to provide conservation plans for your lands, to do, and I know this is a big thing and I haven't mentioned it yet, but it's fire mitigation, right? And the threat of fire. And that is a very, very real threat to both your physical structure and to your businesses and then to your landscapes. And so we are in that, and we have long-term relationships. When we establish clients, we become there as just like you have returning guests yearly at your ranches, we work yearly on long-term contracts on private properties. So here are some things that we do. These are broad topics, and you've all been to meetings in your local area where state foresters, the federal foresters, the county commission, the fire departments, they're all concerned about some one of these aspects of things. But, you know, climate change, whoops, I'm sorry. Let me go back here. So climate change right there, okay, that's a long-term thing. How do you prepare your forest, your landscapes, your ranches for the possibility of a changing climate? Well, it's through scientific management that, that ACF members can offer. Insect and disease is a big problem in some forest ecosystems across the United States. And we're there to, you know, help offer solutions to those vexing problems. But then over the long time, conservation planning. How am I going to protect my landscape? Do I get into a conservation easement? Do I have a timber sale because I want to reduce the density of my forest and change how fires behave? Do I have federal neighbors like the U.S. Forest Service or the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, where you can actually set up an agreement to have both sides of the fence managed at the same time by the same company? That's called the Good Neighbor Authority, and that's available nationwide wherever there's BLM and National Forest System lands. So now, the impact. Wildfire can be hugely discouraging and devastating to lands. It can take a century for people to recover, and the human shock of seeing your landscape changed is something that's really hard to ever get over. But it happens. And so by state, and I even included our British Columbia guests and so forth. There were 2 ranches up there, but these are the total acres of wildfire this was in 2022. So this is the most recent stats I could find by state. But you can see that the least amount is Wyoming at 25,000 acres. But that just happened to be that year. Wyoming in other years could be up there and a leader. And you can see California in 2022 dropped. Okay, the year before, that 309, that was about 4 million acres in California alone. So that's a huge drop. But fires are erratic, they don't come every year, but when they do, you want to have your forest and your landscapes in a resilient form so that the fire can maybe be helpful to the forest rather than devastating. Okay, insects and disease. It's the slow-moving wildfire. This happens over months, not hours. And you see that in the springtime. You see trees starting to fade. By May, they're orange. By September, they're dead. And so in each one of these states, we're you know, California, 2.6 million acres. That's the size of Connecticut. 2.6 million acres. Okay. Wyoming, 98,000 acres. Kind of low there. Montana, 51,000 acres. But again, like fires, these forests cycle in and cycle out. And right now there's some low ebbs in Wyoming and Montana, but in years past, they may have been on the leaderboard. So what we do, what can we do for your ranches? What can we do to help you? We have the ability to assess your woodlands, doing a cruise across the landscape, systematically measuring trees. We observe what the ground conditions are like. We look at your water systems, your streams, your runoff, all of those kinds of ecological niches that you find on your land. We assess them. We can help in this case, if the landowner, the rancher, wants to have a timber sale, we can help with setting up that timber sale and providing expert advice and supervision to the people operating on your land so that you have a very sustainable harvest where your soil damage is non-existent and your trees that you wanted moved out are out and the trees you want left are not damaged by that logging, because you've seen all of that kind of stuff happen if you've been around in the woods. So, and that really, the bottom line is, that's ensuring sustainability for your landscape. You have that soil productivity that can grow trees and forests again, that can sustain your landscape in perpetuity. So one of the other things is that consultants are wired into where to get funding and grants. And just like we heard about raising financial resources and so forth for the foundation, work doesn't come cheap, and this kind of work is hugely expensive. So we have here the NRCS, which is an agency in USDA. They have programs with a professionally prepared forest management plan by an ACF consultant. You would be then eligible to get cost share dollars called EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentive Program funds. There are, and that money, there's a match for that, but that's money that's a grant to you. It's an incentive to do good management, good conservation work on your lands. There's private sector grants, conservation easements, where you sell a bundle of your rights to some other land, to some other holder, okay, but you still have title to the land. That can raise funds for you to do more conservation work. So, and then there's community wildfire protection plans. Community wildfire protection plans are set up by your local county government, your fire district, and basically you look at how you would manage that vegetation as fuel across the landscape. You would build phone trees and email trees to have information passed around. You would have days to pick up the year's growth and to do some thinning and that kind of stuff and move out that wood product, so you haven't just taken a live tree, laid it on the ground, and you haven't solved the problem at all. So community wildfire protection plans, if they're in place, they can allow applicants to apply for grants from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and so there's a whole set of doors that can open with good conservation plans. In British Columbia, and I don't think anybody's in the room from BC today, but there are similar programs to that, having not been to British Columbia only once. I'm not an expert on it, but I do know that those programs are available for our Canadian friends. Okay, I mentioned the Good Neighbor Authority. This example here is a set of timber treatments or fuels or treatments across a landscape, and within that landscape is this gray private land, and these polygons through here are being managed jointly between the private landowner. This map came from the state of Colorado, so the Colorado Forest Service and the U.S. Forest Service. But this is something that, how many people have national forest next to their ranches? Quite a few. Are you aware of that Good Neighbor program? No. Okay. So this is where a consultant can help, and our relationship with going into the Forest Service office, talking about that, saying, hey, this ranch is considering these kinds of treatments, timber, fuels, vegetation treatments, wildlife habitat improvement treatments, and do you have something on the other side, or can you get something on the other side of your fence so that we can do that together? This act was passed in the Farm Bill of 2014. It's nationwide, and it's a permanent authority out of the Farm Bill. So it's a really good deal for folks. And then, you know, in general, representation. We have a checkerboard landscape here. This happens to be California. This is the Bureau of Land Management. But our federal friends, they just say general private land. They don't even name, you know, like your ranch or anything else like that. It's just, okay, it's just not part of the federal estate. But to have a forester working and knowing, representing your interest in these kind of landscape situations, I think is better for the rancher, so that maybe the Good Neighbor Act could come into play here. And rather than just do all the work on the federal side of the fence. And so our leadership for ACF, and our board changes about every 2 years. And we have, of course, Wayne and Shannon in the back here. And then here's where we are for coming up 2024. We have our regional meeting in Little Rock, Arkansas. And then in 2024, our national meeting is in Florida. And so we, like you, we meet a couple of times a year, and otherwise it's Zoom. And then what we want you to know is the ways you can connect with us, besides being in person out here at the desk. And then there we are. That's our desk for the convention. I talked a lot, and I didn't open the floor for questions, but I will now, because I wanted to kind of give a good presentation, but I will be happy to answer questions about what foresters do, about what I said in the slides, about ACF. So, if we have any. Yes, sir.
On the Good Neighbors side, do they do that in the National Park System, or is there any kind of law for that, or is it just with?
No, the National Park System is not included. I'm sure there's very nice park people, okay? but no, it's it's not included. So if anybody near a Fish and Wildlife Refuge, okay, it's not included with Fish and Wildlife Service either. And you know, perhaps someday it should be expanded to those agencies. The thing about the Forest Service and the BLM is that timber sales, the actual cutting of trees for the sale of product for collection by the U.S. Treasury, right? That's allowed, whereas in the Park Service, it's not, and that becomes sort of a big barrier. Okay, yes, sir.
Is there actually? I mean, do they have to participate in that Good Neighbor thing?
No.
Because we have a very unwilling Forest Service.
Yes, thank you, Colleen. The question was, does the Forest Service have to participate in Good Neighbor? I think that's how I heard it, right? I'm a former Forest Service, retired person from the Forest Service. I would say yes, if Congress passed that law and the president enacted it, okay, yes, then that Timbuktu Ranger District where you're working, where you're near, they should be participating. And if you're not, perhaps a professional forester can help in meeting and writing a letter and talking about the benefits of that Good Neighbor Authority. And your state forester too. What state are you in, sir?
Montana.
In Montana. So your state forester, your DNR state forester, Montana's doing a lot. for the feds. And so perhaps, just maybe making a little pressure. So, other questions? Yes? Say what? Sure.
I just want to say get to know who we are and reach out to one of these foresters. I find all the time I get to know a client and we're down the road a year or two and they go, I had no idea this is what all y'all were involved in. So like Joe was saying, it's not just trees and slant trees and cutting trees. These guys are resource managers, land managers. And I think most, I can't speak for everyone, but I think most of our members are happy to talk to you. I go out and give a free consultation and ride around the ranch for an hour or so. And if you don't mind Texas plates on your ranch, the Lone Star will travel. And I'd love to see some of the places. But, yeah, just get to know us. I think there's a good synergy that we can have here. And, most people think of foresters that we're always answering this question. My wife's meeting people, our friends go, well, I thought your husband looked to me. There's other foresters out there to help people like all of y'all. And just know the broadness of who we are. And I think we could build some great relationships.
Thank you, Wayne. And I would say that you've heard the popular movie 6 Degrees of Separation. Came out about 20 years ago or so. In natural resources, in forestry, there's like 6/10 of a degree of separation. And if a consultant that's in your area and you're thinking of contracting with that consultant and they don't have a skill, then there's the other 700 members of the ACF who have that skill that can be brought in on a consulting basis, on a sub-consulting basis. So we are entrepreneurs, businessmen and women, but we're also applied scientists, and we understand landscape ecology, connections. And I'll give you a quick example. How many have aspen? The Colorado folks must have aspen, right, in and around their property, right? Aspen management is, aspens are short-lived trees, about a century. When they fully expand their canopies, there's no shade that hits the ground, they can't regenerate, and then more shade-tolerant trees start to grow in there, and then you lose your aspen clone. So aspen needs some kind of stimulation, like a fire or cutting and so forth, to get those roots to stimulate back up. Cottonwood's the same thing. So it's a quick ecology lesson, but these are the kinds of things that we do. When we come to your property, come to your ranch, we read that landscape. We're always constantly looking, like Wayne said, you take a ride and a walk around through the landscape and talk to you about what you want to see on your land, and then working together with us, we can help it make it happen for you.
Joe?
Yes, sir.
Different levels of membership?
For the ACF, there's a full member, and the full member starts out as an associate member. For 2 years, there's a series of classes that the associate member would take to then become a full member. And the requirements are basically a forestry degree at the baccalaureate level, although there are some cases where people have associate degrees, and then of course more advanced degrees, and then recommendation from other foresters. That's the one level. And let's see, there's, Shannon, can you help me? Let me give you the microphone.
Pretty good. So as Joe mentioned, we do have what we call our candidate membership, and it was in the one slide that we don't know what happened back there. Let me go all the way to the front so you all aren't turning around. So in order for anyone to become a member of the organization, they have to first go through that candidate membership, and they have to be a candidate member for at least a year. And in order to come in as a candidate, they have to have, as Joe mentioned, the professional experience as well as that forestry degree. And then they have to provide client references, forester references, so they check a lot of boxes in order to come in as a candidate. And then once they're a candidate member for at least a year and complete some education, they can apply to become a full member. So we're really an organization where there's a lot of peer-to-peer, not only learning and networking, but making sure that if I'm a member in Joe's area, that while that he's in that candidacy period, is he a good guy? Is he a good forester? Is he somebody that we want among the ranks of the organization? And so then once someone is a full member, that's where the category that most of our members are in. And then we have categories for retired individuals and students in those as well. We are working on development, and I think maybe this may have been the reason for your question, on development of a partner program to allow for individuals who are not practicing foresters but are interested in staying up to date with what ACF and what consulting foresters are learning and reading about, et cetera. A partner program to allow those folks to interface with us more on that, closer to a membership level. Did that answer your question? Okay, back to Joe.
Thank you, Shannon. Any other questions on the floor? Well, hearing